Welcome back to Granbury Texas Politics. You know, this is where we like to dive deep into the issues that are shaping our community. And today, we're tackling a topic that's been making a lot of noise, literally and figuratively. We're talking about Bitcoin mining.
Yeah, it's fascinating because what's happening in Granbury, it's really a reflection of this bigger debate that's happening all across Texas and the U.S. about how we balance, technological innovation, economic opportunity, with the well-being of, everyday people.
Yeah, and you probably heard about all the noise complaints from folks who live near the Bitcoin mine here. But there's so much more to this story than just the noise. We've got news articles, firsthand accounts, legal documents, the whole 9 yards. You ready to unpack all of this?
Absolutely. Let's dive in and really kind of untangle all the threads of this really complex situation.
Okay, so just to make sure everyone's on the same page, when we talk about Bitcoin mining, so we're talking about these incredibly powerful computers that are solving these really complex math problems. And that's what validates the transactions on the Bitcoin network. But the thing is, this process, it uses a ton of energy.
And that's really why Texas has become such a hub for these Bitcoin mining operations. We've got relatively cheap energy here, a deregulated energy market, which makes it easier for miners to set up shop. And then you've got this political climate that's been really supportive of the industry. So
enter Granbury, Texas, home to the Wolf Hollow II gas plant. Now, this plant was contracted to power a Bitcoin mining facility back in 2021. And that's when things kind of took a turn for some residents.
Yeah, when the facility became fully operational in 2022, that's when the complaints started pouring in. And it wasn't just, a little hum in the background. People were describing this constant low-frequency noise that some were comparing to,
a jet engine or a chainsaw just running nonstop. Wow. That's intense. And we actually have some sound clips that were recorded by residents, so you can hear for yourself what they're dealing with. Let's take a listen.
Okay.
Play sound clip of Bitcoin mine noise.
And it's important to note that these sound levels, they're exceeding legal noise ordinances on a pretty regular basis. So this isn't just an annoyance. It's a real violation of residents' right to peace and quiet in their own homes.
Absolutely. It's a serious issue. And this constant noise has led to some really concerning health issues for residents. We're talking about debilitating migraines, ear infections. Some people are even reporting heart problems and hearing loss.
Time magazine actually did a really in-depth report on this, and they profiled a few of the affected residents. One of them, Sarah Rosenkrantz. She ended up in the emergency room because of how severe her migraines were. And her young daughter, Indigo, she started having these really painful ear infections. And there's Larry Potts, he's a retired pastor, who developed heart problems and hearing loss after, months of enduring this noise. He really believes that the stress and the lack of sleep caused by the mine really contributed to his health decline.
It's just heartbreaking to hear these stories. It's clear that this noise pollution is having a real toll on people's lives and well-being. And this isn't just anecdotal either. There's a local ENT doctor who's been seeing patients almost weekly with symptoms that could be linked to the noise.
That's right. And while there haven't been any large-scale studies done specifically on the impact of living near a Bitcoin mine, there's a growing body of research out there that shows a link between prolonged exposure to this kind of noise pollution and a whole range of health problems, including, cardiovascular damage.
So now the question becomes, what is Marathon Digital Holdings, the company that owns the mine? What are they doing to address these issues? I mean, they're one of the biggest Bitcoin holders in the world, so they certainly have the resources to make some changes.
They have acknowledged the noise complaints, and they have taken a few steps to try to mitigate the problem. They've built a sound wall around part of the facility, and they're saying that they're transitioning to a liquid cooling system, which is supposed to be quieter than the air-cooled fans they were using before.
Residents are saying that the sound wall hasn't really made much of a difference, and they're skeptical about how effective this liquid cooling system will really be. They feel like Marathon isn't really taking their concerns seriously enough.
And that skepticism has led to some pretty interesting legal challenges. There's this constable, John Shirley. He's a former oath keeper, and he's been writing citations against the mine for disorderly conduct.
Hold on. A former oath keeper is taking on a Bitcoin mining giant. That's a twist I wasn't expecting.
It is a little unexpected. So he's arguing that the noise is a violation of state laws. And he's actually issued over $17,000 in fines against Marathon. Marathon is contesting those fines, of course. They're claiming that they're operating within the legal noise limits. But the case is actually headed to trial. And it'll be interesting to see how the court rules. because it could set a precedent for how noise pollution from these Bitcoin mines is regulated.
Okay, so we've got noise complaints, health concerns, legal battles. What else is going on here? It seems like there are some broader implications to consider, especially when it comes to the environment.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Residents are also worried about the potential for increased air pollution, especially because there's talk of expanding the Wolf Hollow power plant even further. They're concerned about the impact on air quality. All over the U.S., it's becoming this national issue as more and more of these mines are setting up shop near residential areas.
So Granbury is like the canary in the coal mine for the rest of the country. It's forcing us to really confront this clash between technological innovation and the well-being of our communities. So what are residents doing to push for change in this situation?
They've been really active. They've organized protests. They've gathered hundreds of signatures on petitions. And they're even exploring the possibility of filing a civil nuisance lawsuit against Marathon. They're really determined to make their voices heard and to fight for their right to peace and quiet.
But it sounds like they're facing a pretty uphill battle here, given Texas's, somewhat lax noise regulations and the political influence of the Bitcoin mining industry.
Yeah, it's definitely a David versus Goliath situation. But residents are hoping that by shining a light on this issue, they can put pressure on lawmakers and regulators to take action. They want to see stricter rules to protect communities from the negative impacts of Bitcoin mining.
This whole situation really highlights the challenges of trying to regulate an industry that's as new and as rapidly evolving as cryptocurrency. It feels like the laws and regulations are struggling to keep up with the pace of technological change.
Absolutely. And that tension is really playing out in that legal battle between Marathon and Constable Shirley. The company's claiming they're operating within the existing noise limits. But residents are arguing that those limits are outdated and they don't adequately address the kind of noise pollution that a Bitcoin mine generates.
Yeah, it's almost like a Wild West scenario where the rules haven't really been clearly established yet. And in the meantime, it's the residents who are really bearing the brunt of the consequences.
It raises this really crucial question about, whose interests are being prioritized here. Are we putting the needs of industry ahead of the well-being of our communities?
That's a really good question. I think that's one that a lot of Granbury residents are asking themselves right now. It also brings up this whole issue of environmental justice and whether everyone in our community has equal access to a healthy and peaceful environment.
Exactly. And let's not forget about that proposed expansion of the Wolf Hollow power plant, which would just feed even more energy to this Bitcoin mine. And that raises a whole other set of environmental concerns.
Right. What are the potential consequences of that expansion? I mean, it seems like it would just amplify the issues that residents are already dealing with.
Well, the biggest concern is the increase in air pollution. The new plant, it would be fueled by natural gas, which is a fossil fuel. And burning fossil fuels releases all of these harmful pollutants into the air, including carbon dioxide, which contributes to climate change.
And we've seen reports that the expansion could lead to the release of hundreds of thousands of tons of carbon dioxide every year. I mean, that's a significant amount. And it seems to really go against the global efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and combat climate change.
Yeah, it's definitely a step backwards from an environmental standpoint, not to mention the impact on local air quality. Those pollutants, they can have serious health effects on residents, especially vulnerable populations like children and the elderly.
So it's this double whammy of potential harm to the global climate and to the health of people who are living right here in Granbury.
It's a classic example of environmental injustice, where the benefits of a project like this, they often go to those outside the community, while the burdens fall disproportionately on the people who live nearby.
So this expansion is really adding fuel to the fire for folks who are already worried about the impact of the Bitcoin mine on their health and the environment. So beyond the disorderly conduct citations that Constable Shirley's been issuing, what other legal options are available to residents?
Well, one option that's been discussed is filing a civil nuisance lawsuit against Marathon. This type of lawsuit would argue that the noise from the mine is unreasonably interfering with residents' use and enjoyment of their property.
So what would residents be hoping to achieve with a lawsuit like that?
Well, the main goal would be to get an injunction from the court, which would essentially be a legal order forcing Marathon to stop, or at least significantly reduce the noise coming from the mine.
But wouldn't that be really difficult to prove in court, especially considering the lack of clear noise regulations at the county level in Texas?
It definitely wouldn't be easy. They would have to present really strong evidence that the noise is causing significant harm to their health and their quality of life. And they'd have to overcome the argument that Marathon is technically operating within those existing legal limits.
So it's a risky strategy, but one that some residents feel is worth pursuing, given the lack of other options.
Exactly. They're hoping that by taking legal action, they can at least force Marathon to take their concerns more seriously and come to the table to find a solution that works for everyone.
This whole situation is fascinating. From a legal perspective, it's interesting to see how the legal landscape is having to evolve. Alongside these technological advancements, it feels like the law is always playing catch-up, in a way.
That's very true. And in this case, the law is grappling with this whole new set of challenges we'd never really encountered before. Like, how do you regulate a decentralized industry like cryptocurrency? How do you measure and mitigate the environmental impacts of Bitcoin mining? These are all questions that we're still trying to figure out.
And as these technologies continue to develop and become more widespread, we're going to have to adapt our laws and regulations to keep pace
And make
so
sure
that we're protecting both their communities and the environment.
Absolutely. And it's going to require a lot of collaboration and dialogue between industry experts, lawmakers, regulators, and community members. We need to find solutions that work for everyone, not just the people who stand to profit from these new technologies.
So let's talk about some of those potential solutions. What are some concrete steps that Marathon could take to address the noise concerns and lessen its environmental impact?
Well, as we mentioned, they've already started transitioning some of their mining equipment to liquid cooling, which is supposed to be significantly quieter, so they could accelerate that process and commit to converting the entire facility to liquid cooling as soon as possible.
Okay, that would definitely be a positive step in the right direction. What about the sound wall? Could they do anything to improve its effectiveness?
They could consider extending the wall to enclose the entire facility, rather than just a portion of it. They could also explore using different materials or design features that are more effective at blocking sound.
Now, what about the environmental concerns? Beyond the noise, what can they do to reduce their carbon footprint?
One option would be to invest in renewable energy sources, like solar or wind power, to offset the energy they're using from the gas plant. That would be a more sustainable approach.
Yeah, it would, but it would likely require a pretty substantial investment on their part.
It would, but it would also send a really strong message to the community that they're committed to being responsible corporate citizens and that they're willing to take concrete steps to lessen their environmental impact.
You know, ultimately, it comes down to building trust with the community and demonstrating that they're not just here to make a profit, but that they actually care about the people and the environment.
Exactly. If Marathon wants to be a good neighbor in Granbury, they're going to have to prove that they're willing to listen to residents' concerns and take action to address them.
That's a great point. To kind of wrap up this part of our deep dive, you know, we've covered a lot of ground here. From the technical aspects of Bitcoin mining to the complex legal and environmental challenges that it presents. We've also seen how this issue has really divided the community and sparked this larger conversation about the role of technology in our lives and the trade-offs that we're willing to make in the name of progress.
So if you've got just a little bit more to discuss in our deep dive into the Bitcoin mining situation here in Granbury, stick with us. We'll be back in a moment.
We're back with the final part of our deep dive into the Bitcoin mining situation here in Granbury. You know, we've talked about the problems, the concerns, the potential solutions, but I think it's important to kind of take a step back for a minute and look at the bigger picture. What does all of this tell us about the future of Bitcoin mining and its relationship with the communities, where these operations are located?
Well, I think Granbury's story is really a microcosm of this much larger trend that we're seeing. This growing tension between the rapid expansion of the Bitcoin mining industry and the needs and concerns of the people who live near these operations.
Yeah, it's like you're in the middle of this technological gold rush, but we haven't really fully thought through the social and environmental consequences.
Exactly. And I think Granbury is like this wake-up call. It's showing us that we can't just blindly embrace these new technologies without really thinking critically about their impact on people and the planet.
So what needs to change
Yeah.
to create a more sustainable and equitable future for Bitcoin mining? What would a responsible approach to this industry look like?
Well, I think, for starters, we need stronger regulations and oversight at all levels of government. Local, state, and federal agencies. They really need to step up and develop clear guidelines for noise pollution, air quality, and energy use for these types of operations.
Regulations need to have teeth, right? They need to be enforceable and carry meaningful penalties for violations.
Absolutely. We can't just have rules on paper. We need to make sure that they're actually being followed and that there are consequences for companies that disregard them.
Beyond regulations, I think we also need more transparency and accountability. From the Bitcoin mining industry, companies need to be upfront about their environmental impact, and they need to be willing to work with communities to address concerns.
I couldn't agree more. They need to be proactive, not reactive. They need to incorporate community engagement and environmental sustainability into their business models from the very beginning.
And that brings us to the role of consumers. We all have a part to play in this. We need to be informed about where our Bitcoin is coming from and what the environmental and social costs are.
That's right. We need to demand more sustainable practices from the companies we support, and we need to hold them accountable for their actions.
And it's important to remember that this isn't just about Bitcoin. This is about any industry that has the potential to significantly impact communities and the environment. We need to be applying these same principles of sustainability and accountability across the board.
I completely agree. This is a much larger conversation about how we as a society manage the growth of new technologies and industries in a way that benefits everyone, not just a select few.
So what's next for Granbury? What's the next chapter in this ongoing saga?
Well, the legal battles will likely continue, and residents are going to keep pushing for change. But ultimately, the outcome really depends on whether Marathon is willing to listen to the community's concerns and make some real compromises.
Yeah, they're at a crossroads. They can either dig in their heels and fight tooth and nail against any attempts at regulation, or they can step up and be a leader in the industry by embracing more sustainable practices and working collaboratively with the community.
And the decision they make, it's going to have implications far beyond Granbury. It will set a precedent for how the Bitcoin mining industry interacts with communities across the country and around the world.
So the stakes are high, and the whole world is watching to see how this unfolds.
It's a fascinating case study, and one that I think we'll be talking about for years to come.
Now let's talk about what you, our listeners, can do to help the residents of Granbury. First, stay informed about this issue and share what you learn with others. Second, support organizations that are fighting for environmental justice and responsible technological development. And finally, reach out to your elected officials and let them know that you care about this issue and that you want them to take action.
Your voice matters, and together we can make a difference.
That's right. We here at Granbury Texas Politics believe that knowledge is power, and when we work together, we can create the change we want to see in our community. Thanks for listening.